Abigail. What are we talking about this week?
Well, we've talked about when our kids get aggressive, and this week we're actually going to talk about our own parental aggression, the times that we lose it.
And we all do.
Yes, and what we can do about it.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, I'm Elle Kwan. I'm in Hong Kong and I'm your host of the Hand in Hand podcast. We're a non-profit from San Francisco operating globally, and we decode children's difficult behaviours one parenting challenge at a time.
And I'm Abigail Wald, founder of realtimeparenting.com and also a certified hand-in-hand parenting instructor. And together, Elle and I like to take a look at our everyday lives as parents through a hand-in-hand parenting lens, and how we use these tools and sometimes fail to use these tools in our daily lives. And we also love to support parents. And we got a couple of people who wrote in asking for us to discuss this issue. Please tell us how not to blow our own lids. So this is an important topic. It's one that all of us deal with at times. And so we wanted to take a look at it.
So I guess when we're talking about aggression, we're talking about those feelings of anger, of feeling out of control, of yelling, of just not parenting the way we saw ourselves parenting. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I think I golly knows I've had those moments.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They happen early on. I remember very, very early on with my little girl and her screaming. And I just didn't know what to do. You know, I'd read the books. I knew how to put her to sleep. She was full. It was night. I was tired. She was still screaming. I just didn't know what to do. I felt like pulling my hair out, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, it was just shocking, the anger that was running through me. And it was, I guess now in retrospect, all to do with my feelings of failure and just feeling alone in that room. You know, I'd told everyone I could handle it. We were back there. I couldn't handle it, you know. And I just had to go find my husband and say, you do it. I can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I am right there with you. You're bringing up so many memories from those early years. And I have to say, thankfully, it really doesn't happen that much anymore. That I feel so out of it. You know, there can be the perfect storm, right? For sure. But back then, it really wasn't about the perfect storm. It was just like every moment was a perfect storm. You know? And,
cocktail for destruction.
Yeah. I mean, you know, not every moment, I should say, but a whole heck of a lot of weather patterns. Let's just say
it can feel so scary, right? I mean, you feel scared of yourself, your capabilities, what you might do. Yeah.
And in fact, that was really ultimately what made me reach out to Hand in Hand. Was that I got to a point where I kind of was just like waving the white flag. I was like, I give up. Like I thought I could do this, and I can't do it. And yeah, I was afraid of the feelings of rage that I had, of just like the parent that I was being was not at all the parent I had wanted to be or imagined myself to be. And it almost felt like I was taken over. Like it felt like an out of body experience practically. Like, who is this? You know?
Yeah.
So we just wanted to address that because I know a lot of parents have those, you know, moments sometimes.
So how can we kind of start a kind of repair process then?
Well, repair is definitely obviously, I think, a really big piece of it. But before we even repair with our kids, I think there's just so much work we can do on our own, right? And you do bring up a great idea, which is repair with our kids.
I actually meant on ourselves. I was like, we're feeling broken, how can we repair?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is like to cut ourselves some slack, right? And, you know, we're not saying it's okay to scare your kids or to yell or, you know, to just get really just angry and all of what comes with that. But But I think it is important to say it's okay to not be okay all the time.
Right.
You know, that it's okay. Like, we're not going to always have it together. We're not going to always be perfect. And you brought up such a great thing, right? Like, you were like, I had to sort of, say to my husband that, like, I couldn't do this, right?
Right.
And I don't know if you use these words tapping out or not, but like, I often will share that idea with parents of tapping out, right? That like when you know you're in a bad spot, when you know you're not in a good place, if you have someone else in the house who can pick up, right? Whether it's a much older sibling even, right? Whether it's your mother, your mother-in-law, your father-in-law, maybe a babysitter, maybe it's your spouse, maybe anybody that can help you. Maybe it's a friend, right? If there's somebody else there that can help and you're not in a good spot, to really tap out and say, I'm not good right now. Like, I need help. Can you take over?
Right.
And we talked about, teaching our kids this idea of like using their walk-away power.
Right, yes.
I can't remember. Maybe that was even the first
one of the
episode
first episodes we did, yeah.
And so I think it's really a great moment to model that for our kids, like using our walkaway power. Like, I remember I used to think like, no, I'm in it to win it. Like, I'm fighting this fight, right? Like he is going to learn that bedtime means bedtime,
right?
Or, any of that. And the moment that I finally was like, no, I'm like off the rails here. Like I'm going to use my walkaway power. This isn't me giving up. This isn't me losing. This isn't me not teaching. This is me actually modeling like my own self-regulation, my own ability to say, hey, I'm not actually able to truly parent you in this moment. And I love you, but there's somebody else better right now, or I'll be that better person if there's no one to tap out to, right? Like, to be able to say, hey, I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to take a break. Also using that walkaway power, it's a great opportunity to have your kids, we try to teach so often from like, watch me do everything right. Like, this is how you do things great, And I think it's really important for kids to see us kind of fail or fall down. And acknowledge, like, this isn't my best, but I care, and I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to climb back up, and I'm going to rise up, right? And this is how I rise up when I have fallen down. And I think that's a huge thing for our kids to be able to see.
I think it's funny that those kind of both of those two things, like tapping out and also just saying, I'm going to get out of this situation right now. It does kind of go against a lot of the way, our instinct is that we must be parents, we must be there. And we're kind of, there's this illusion that everyone else is doing it properly. And why can't we? That whole thing as well. And all of that plays into this angst and aggression and anger that kind of ultimately erupts, I think.
Absolutely. You bring up so many good points, because I think that those thoughts are a huge piece of all of this. And I think that is the deeper work that gets done, right? Like, there are things we can do, and we're going to go over some technical, like actual, like kind of tips and tricks. But I want to circle back to what you said, because I think it's so important and so insightful that very often there's actually a thought that kind of trips us up in this moment. And it might be a thought we're not even really aware that we're thinking, right? But it kind of gets really triggered in this moment. So I want to give a few examples from parents that I've worked with that might help illuminate that. So I had a mom who she was really sensitive to her daughter screaming from behind her, because as a child, her mom had always yelled at her from behind her. And so that trigger of like hearing somebody yell from behind her really triggered this cascade of feelings in her body. And it was kind of like a physical trigger, but also an emotional and thought trigger, right? Almost like, I sometimes refer to these like silent promises we made to ourselves when we were children. So in that kind of a case, perhaps she had made a silent promise to herself about like, you know, when I grow up, I will not be yelled at from behind. Like that will not be safe for me, right? I will live in a home where that doesn't happen. And then you have a child who is doing that, right? Because they're not kind of part of that silent promise you made with yourself.
Yeah, because it was silent.
They're not hip to that. But that said, like that can be really, really profound for us. That might have been a survival mechanism for us, right?
But the thing is knowing that thought, right? I mean, how do you get there?
Yeah, and that's a great question, right? And that's the kind of work you can do for yourself in your listening partnerships. We can put a link up for listening partnership for those of you who aren't familiar with it. And that's the kind of work you can certainly do with a hand-in-hand instructor or with a therapist to help yourself start to hear what are your thoughts, right? What is getting triggered for you in those moments? Because it's deeply personal for each person.
Like you said, you know, that's such a very specific circumstance to that lady, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I had another mom who every time her daughter would like ask things of her, kind of to be in like the parental role, so to speak, she would feel really overwhelmed and exhausted. And she had felt like she really wasn't parented when she was a child. She had to parent her parent. And so now here she was having to parent her child, but like at no point had she gotten to be the child. And so it just felt like, again, like, oh my gosh, I promised myself I wouldn't be in this position again, maybe, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I call it a silent promise. That's my own personal version of it. That's not a hand-in-hand term, but you know, you can think of it however you want to think of it. But in this hand-in-hand tool of listening partnerships, you can learn to find what are your words that come into your head in those moments. And very often it won't feel verbal in that moment because you're so triggered. But if you kind of think back about it later, or you hear the words you would use describing that kind of experience.
Sometimes the feeling that you get, you know, when you talk about those feelings that you have going through your body, and where does that stem from, or where did you feel like that before?
Yes. Such a great question to ask in a listening partnership. Exactly.
But then how does this help? Is this kind of, once you're aware of this, you can do something about it? You know, I think you call this unwiring the thought. Why are you unwiring the thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like there's a few different ways to help get in there to kind of break that cycle of our own aggression, right? So one is unwiring the thought or rewiring the thought, right? So, you know, so for that mom who her child would yell behind her, right? So she simply had the idea to then start telling herself, like, this is not my mom and I am not a child anymore. I am now a mother and this is my daughter. This is not my mother. I am safe, right? Before she would turn around. And just saying that helped bring her temperature down and completely changed how she was able to handle the moment, right? So for the other mom looking at this lack of parenting in her own life and that her need to still be a child and like, you know, her feelings of like, how can I be the parent yet when I still haven't even been the kid yet, you know?
Yeah.
And to start working through that in her LP was really profound, right? So it's not like a magic answer, but it sort of somehow, it reminds me of that Max Planck quote, which some people attribute to Max Planck, the physicist, and some people actually attribute to Wayne Dwyer. So it's a great quote, whoever's it is. But this idea of when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess it just dislodges, you know, that pattern, doesn't it? It interrupts kind of your cycle, your anger cycle or your aggression cycle.
Yeah, and it's that same thing that happens with our kids. It's like when we can understand where it's coming from, I think it kind of opens our heart to compassion maybe. I'm not like entirely sure why it changes the conversation, but I know that it does.
So that's unwiring the thought. And I've heard you talk about unwiring the body as well. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah. So I'll give an example from my own life for that.
Ooh,
So
okay.
when my kids were little, I would get really angry on occasion, and I would find that I would grab them by their shoulders.
Okay.
And it scared me. And I would get really angry, and the first thing I would do is I would grab when I was like really, not the first thing I would do. The first thing I would do that would be like, oh my gosh, I'm now scared, right? I'm out of control. It was my signal to myself, right? And then often it would be followed by like a yell or like, you know, just me getting so angry, so feeling rage. That feeling that of like flushing with rage, right? And so I knew I needed help because that was not okay. That was not who I wanted to be. And so one of the things I found was, number one, a lot of LP work, right? Working with a hand-in-hand instructor. I was definitely doing those things, and that helped turn that around for me. But something else that I found was that if I allowed myself to actually touch my children when I was in anger, it was almost like completing an electrical circuit, right? And then it's like the rage would flow through me, right, towards them. I'm not proud of any of this, by the way, but I'm going to be really honest about it because—
Thank you for sharing this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really like sad for me to share it, actually. But I think it's really honest. And I think it's important that we be honest as parents because I think, you know, this wasn't who I wanted to be, right? And this is why I found Hand in Hand. And thankfully, very, very thankfully, I was able to completely change all this. But at that time, I found that if I completed that circuit, right, there was like an electrical charge of rage that would kind of flow through me towards them, right? And I never hurt my kids, but I'm sure I scared them. And I know I scared myself, right? And so, you know, it was just me out of control. It was me having all the huge feelings of being a parent that like I wasn't prepared for. I didn't know how to handle everything yet. And my skill set was not adequate to my stress set at that moment, you know? Like the tools I needed were way above my skill set at that time.
Right.
And so hence the feeling of out of control, which went back to my own childhood and then feelings of rage and all of that. And so if I touched my child when I was having that feeling, that electrical current would flow. And so what I realized is I taught myself, well, what if I didn't touch? What if I didn't allow myself to touch when I was angry, right? What if I actually took my hands and I did the opposite of a grab? And so I spent hours, I mean, this sounds nuts, but I spent hours during the day. Like literally I developed this, I mean, you could almost call it a tic, but it was like an intentional choice where I would take my hands and I would— it's hard to explain over the radio here, but like a podcast. But I would take my hands and kind of push them backwards, like opening my hands, like opening a flower, right?
So the opposite of like this kind of forceful move forward.
Exactly. It was like a graceful opening, a graceful unbending. And so I would do that move, and I found that move very, very soothing. And I practiced it so much that even in the moments of upset, I was able to do that move because it was like so in my body by then.
Right.
So I didn't save it for that moment of rage. Like I practiced it all day long. And then in that moment, I could just key into it and I would do that move and it would calm my body down. And it didn't allow me to complete the electrical circuit, and it completely changed my interaction with my kids.
Wow.
So I call that like unwiring the body or rewiring the body, right?
So you're working on your mind and your body responses simultaneously, really.
Yeah. I mean, you know, for everybody, it's going to be different, right? For some people, one way might work, another way might not, you know. These are just
I think
ideas.
even in those stories you mentioned, you know, it's such a personal experience, the way you receive and give anger, basically, you know. And that's why there's no kind of cut and dry answer, is there, apart from look in yourself and do it that way.
Yeah, and you don't have to do that alone, right? Because this is deep work, and it helps to be in the safety of someone who can help you through that, right? And, you know, I know, Elle, you had wanted to talk about that idea of like giving up, right? Like kind of quitting in the moment and how useful that can be, right?
Yeah, I mean, I first heard Patty say this and I thought it was kind of bonkers to start with. But I think so much of, being a parent is you feel like you need to be in control, you need answers, you need to be the one listening, you're not being listened to. And I think just being able to say, I'm done actually at this moment. You sit on the sofa. I know what Patty says is just lay on the floor and go, I'm done. Just give up. And that kind of, it stops all that thinking. It stops the effort that you're going to make things, fantastic or just bearable. And it just buys you a moment. And often it is so intriguing for our children to see us do this, right? Yes. So that then they come to us. And it kind of defuses tension in that way as well. But it gives everyone that pause, I guess.
Yes. It's another great, I think, version of using your walkaway power, right? It's like walking away emotionally from the situation. You can even add play into it and be like, I'm a mommy puddle. I've melted, right? If you have that in you. And if you don't have it in you, you can just quit and be like, I'm so sorry. My battery is drained right this second. I'm going to get it back together. I'm here. I love you. I just need to take a moment to reboot myself, right?
Yeah.
Or, I don't know. I used to even play red light. This is I'm having a red light moment. Nothing good is going to happen here, And again, if you have the ability to turn that into play, maybe you start playing red light, green light, right? And that helps get you back in the mood, Sometimes I had one mom who was I just discovered recently that if I put on a certain kind of music, I think it was Shania Twain, but
well, that don't impress me much.
What is that? Is that a song of hers?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I don't really know her, but yeah. So if she puts on Shania Twain, she's or I can't remember who it was. I think that's who it was, but she's I cannot be in a bad mood. It's not possible for me.
Yeah.
So there are so many different ways and everybody is so distinct. And so again, what we're really trying to say is figure out who you are. Right?
I think as well that, you need two sets of tools. And one is the longer term tools, those, what you were saying about the mom with the kid shouting behind her, she is working on that independently with someone, that wasn't her child. But in the moment, you need these tools as well. You need, the days you didn't sleep and you can't handle it today, or, sometimes the music will work, sometimes it won't. So it's good to have these options, I guess.
Definitely. And let's just say also, just for the sake of it, for any of you who may be feeling you're having a moment where you really are scared, you really feel out of control. You're yelling at your child. You feel like your child is scared. I know Patty has mentioned before that in that kind of a circumstance, you might consider giving your kids a safe word. Right? So a word that they can say that lets you know, hey, Mom, I'm scared, right? Or hey, Dad, I'm scared. I need you to check in with yourself, And that word could be a word they come up with. And the only really important piece of that is that you are really, if you're going to offer that you're really able to make that promise. I think that if you say that word, I will for sure drain myself of my anger and be able to walk in the other room or turn around and use my walkaway power or, that your child, it can help your child not feel, it's not the answer to it because obviously, you would still have to do the personal work, but it can help give your child a tiny feeling of control in what may feel like a really scary, helpless, uncontrolled situation. And, obviously, just because it bears mentioning, if anybody feels like they really do need help, that please do reach out to somebody, right? Because
Absolutely.
It doesn't feel good to you and it doesn't feel good to your kids. But for those of you that just need to figure out how to handle the occasional explosions and want less of it, and nobody's in danger, then these are some really great ways to go.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories and everyone's stories, Abigail, but your story especially. I know that can be so hard.
Thank you. It's a little embarrassing. So, and definitely, honestly,
we've all been there, I think.
Yeah, genuinely hard to share. But I think it's really important because I think it's my favorite part of Hand in Hand is that I have always felt very safe and welcomed in this community to be real about my struggles and to be accepted, and it is what has allowed me to grow into a parent that I feel genuinely proud of, and quickly it helped transform that. And I had tried so many things and they hadn't. And so for me, being able to be honest and go into that is really part of what allowed me to rise up above it. So
yeah. Oh, thank you. That was so useful. And yeah, thank you for your honesty. I think it's always a work in progress, isn't it? And you're a good case. You've turned things around. I'm realizing even during the course of this conversation that a lot of my anger is so fast that I find it hard to capture. So we're talking about how does it feel? What does it look like? Mine just erupts so fast that I think I'm fine. And then I'm not. And I think that's probably what I need to take to my listening partnership. Like, why is it? And where did that come from? I haven't looked at that at all.
Yeah, it's such a good one. And I think so many of us can relate to that, right? And I guess I would say two thoughts that might be helpful to wonder on for anybody else who relates to that one are, number one, that idea of... I think the silent promises we talked about earlier can play a part in that because you can feel like I'm being that parent I wanted to be. I'm being it, and I'm upholding my silent promise, and you seem not to appreciate that. So,
right.
Okay,
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes that can be what's going on there. But I also think that this is a whole other discussion that we can do one day, but that very often we cross our own boundaries.
Right.
And we're so used to, as mothers, crossing our own boundaries, even though it's actually something we ideally want to be able to teach our kids is to have healthy boundaries. And in order to teach it, we kind of need to model it. But as women, as mothers, so many of us are used to just being like, I'm tired, but that doesn't mean anything. I'm hungry, but that doesn't mean anything. I haven't showered, but that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
No problem. I'll take care of it. Right? That's so much of what we do.
Papering the cracks. Yeah.
Yeah. And in this constant crossing of our own boundaries, it's like we hit a wall where there is no elasticity left because we've used up all of that elasticity.
Right.
Yeah. And so we just hit that hard boundary. And so if we can get better about sort of feeling our soft boundaries and listening to them and honoring them, then that sort of over the waterfall boundary happens less.
Good insights. Thank you. I hope that was helpful it was helpful to me. I hope it was helpful to other listeners. Thank you for writing us in and giving us the inspiration for this podcast. If you have other ideas, please do let us know. We love hearing from you. I will put in our links and resources some links to consulting that Hand in Hand does. If you want to take a class with and work with an instructor, or Abigail, you have a 30-day reset coming up, right?
Yes, I have another 30-day family reset class that is set to start, in fact, any day now. There's only one spot left, so if anybody wants that, please do let me know. I would love to include you on that. So, yeah.
And as ever, please rate and review us and check us out on all the social medias. And we will be back next week.
Yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.